The other guy is a guy who takes no prisoners when it comes to sports.
Let's stomp these dudes.
Together, they bring you the best in Oklahoma State sports talk and opinions on sports from around the country.
That's right. Listen up. Hey, listen up. You.
It's Jason Elmquist.
Today, I'm a mild-mannered reporter for the newspaper.
And Patrick Wheeler.
I'm a very dangerous man.
This is the Afternoon Sports Drive on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network.
That's what I'm talking about.
Sport. You ain't never heard nothing like this. Let me work. Show me where the mic is. I'm on stage, black shirt and my Timbs. You know how I do it. I ain't playing with you. I've been grinding. Anybody trying to sleep on me, better do something with your eyelids. I hear a lot of whining, but I don't hear a lot of rhyming. Whoa.
Afternoon Sports Drive, Triple Play Sports Radio Network.
My ear, then I block that. Put me on stage, I'ma rock that. Saying you the best. Stop that, phony. I am not that. Yeah. What are y'all doing out here? What are y'all doing out here? Maybe you should spend a little less time with the women on your arms and a little bit more with your career. I ain't saying I'm the
Patrick
best.
Wheeler here with you on Fridays. We wrap up the week here on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network. It's been a busy, busy week in the world of sports and continues to be that way as sports are back. They continue to roll in. The NBA kicked off last night. The NHL kicks off on Saturday, tomorrow. Major League Baseball still going, even though they've faced some bumps in the road. And by all looks of it, college football is right around the corner, as almost at least all the Power Fives have come out and put up, except for the Big 12, I should say, have put up their plans for the upcoming schedule for the fall. The Big 12 still holding out on deciding what they're going to do, so much so that they have officially canceled once again here. The first time it was postponed, now canceled Big 12 Media Day, which was scheduled to take place Monday. Per the Big 12, they said they have not decided if this will be rescheduled or not. Obviously, kind of if you connect the dots there, saying that they may be waiting into next week before a decision is made. A board meeting is scheduled that day on Monday, but according to Bob Bowlesby, he's not really sure if a decision will even be made that day. So when I say that the Big 12 has been waiting literally last minute for this, I mean it. They've stuck to their word that they will wait as long as possible. Honestly, it's not seeming like Bob Bowlesby is in that huge of a hurry, and I mean that's fine with me personally. I mean, take their time on this. Take their time. We all know the SEC, the ACC making decisions this week. Hank Boulanger planning on joining me at 3:25 from the Big 12 Fanatics sports podcast there, that we'll talk with him about what he thinks is going to happen and everything else as well. We'll get more into that as we go throughout the show. Let's kick off the show with the biggest news of the day. It started early this morning, and it came out of Major League Baseball, and it hit me pretty personally because it happens to be my favorite team. And the St. Louis Cardinals, with 2 positive coronavirus tests, have had to have their game postponed tonight, or actually supposed to take place today. It was a matinee game today against the Milwaukee Brewers. It has been postponed and pushed to a doubleheader on Sunday, which, by the way, they're now 7-inning games. Doubleheaders in Major League Baseball will now be 7 innings apiece, and so far the Saturday game is still on. There's a lot to dive into with this being the second team that's now had outbreak. Now, I wouldn't even call it an outbreak. Second team that's now have positive tests, other than the Marlins as of recent here. And it's reported that it's 2 players. Haven't said any names, who they are. Well, let me say this first. I am glad that what we're seeing so far is they're not canceling or postponing the entire series. You know, you got 2 tested positive, and that definitely doesn't warrant let's just wipe out the series. So I'm glad that's not taking place right now. More testing obviously being done today to make sure it's just those 2. But where I think the problem lies is the timing of the testing. I'll explain. Because when we're thinking about these tests that are taking place daily in Major League Baseball, They're coming back within 24 hours, sometimes even sooner than that. So I'm not sure what time of the day Major League Baseball teams are testing, but to me, they would have to do it first thing in the morning. If you assume it's going to be a 24-hour turnaround on those tests. The St. Louis Cardinals found out last night that they had 2 positives. So you have to assume, maybe they tested originally Wednesday evening. They get those tests back tomorrow or last night, and that says, okay, that's 24 hours. We got 2 positives. Right there, if you don't do it in the first thing in the morning, get it back to start the next morning, that's when you have to postpone things, start the contact tracing, and make sure you can get your testing done that day. Because when you find out Thursday night that you've got 2 positive tests, well, there's not enough time to get everybody tested to make sure they're not positive and still turn around and play your game that's taking place today. It was going to be at, 12:30, 1 o'clock. Not possible. So that's why this one was postponed. I mean, I don't know if it had taken place at 7 o'clock that night. Tonight, would it still be postponed? It would take a really, really quick turnaround because you would have to let the Brewers know that you're not going to be able to play. So I just want to make sure that's clear. I don't know if they're not testing in the mornings, but they should be. Because let me say this. When we continue to do this testing every single day, if you get 2 guys testing positive that next morning, well, then you can just do what the UFC did and the PGA Tour did. You remove those guys, you quarantine them, and you move on and keep playing. You pull them, you have a taxi squad for a reason, and you keep playing. So this is a solution to it. This is something that can be done. This is no reason to me to just cancel the season. Because I'll say this, that was what the immediate reaction was. From everybody that, for some reason, loves all the bad news, all over social media, if you look all over the news headlines in sports media, it's, we can't continue with baseball anymore. It's the Marlins, now the Cardinals, who's next? Again, I reiterate the point that we're going to have positive tests no matter what we do. We're going to have positive tests no matter what we do. I know the NBA hasn't had any since the bubble, but do I believe that's going to necessarily be the case all the way throughout? I really don't. I don't think it's a foolproof idea. So we're going to have positive tests. There's no reason to freak out, I think, if you're Rob Manfred, if you're Major League Baseball, and try to have to cancel the season. That doesn't make sense to me right now. Now, if you were consistently having outbreaks among teams, and I'm talking an outbreak, not 2 guys, I'm talking 6, 7, 8 plus guys, and it's just spreading like crazy, then you got to reevaluate and consider some things. But this, to me, is going to end up being just like a UFC PGA Tour situation, right? Because the UFC and the PGA Tour, they set that precedent when it started off with this testing. They were the first to come back. They immediately had guys test positive. They didn't shut down their sport. They quarantined those guys. They got them out of competition. They moved forward, and everything's been going pretty smoothly since. So Major League Baseball is going to do that same thing, I believe. Now, I will say this, because it also brings up the bubble question again. You've got people that said, we knew it, there should have been a bubble. There should have been a bubble to start Major League Baseball, and none of this would be happening. And I got to admit this, I think I personally underestimated how professional players would handle this situation not being in a bubble. Because I thought to myself, with most of these guys making a lot of money. Now, everybody makes a lot of money in Major League Baseball, but a lot of money. Some of these guys much more than others. I thought maybe that would force them to take things a little bit more serious. Again, I don't know if the 2 Cardinals players that got it were out there bar hopping in Minnesota. I don't know if they were breaking protocol. They could have been doing everything right and still managed to get it. But if they weren't, kind of like we've heard the Marlins weren't, then that does bring up the question of, would this be different if they were in this bubble situation? Because then they wouldn't have that opportunity to even break any type of guideline, any type of protocol. And it makes me think back to when all of this talk was going on in the offseason. Well, it was technically when baseball should have been going, but we still call it the offseason because they were still fighting over money. But I'm talking even before that, when the original idea, who remembers that original idea? It was, let's have a bubble in Arizona, let's have a bubble in Florida, let's play 100 games, and let's go with it that way. You know, that seemed, I specifically remember coming on the show and vouching for that. That made sense to me. The states were saying at that time we're ready to do it. Heck, that was back in what, April? April and May? I mean, they were ready to go. If Major League Baseball could have pulled the trigger on that, then we might be seeing some different outcome. We might not. We might be halfway through a season right now with a lot less bumps in the road. Maybe. We don't know, but maybe. We also got to remember this. This isn't Major League Baseball's fault. Okay? I'm talking about the owners and Rob Manfred here. You remember when all these arguments were taking place, it was the players that were saying, look, we don't want to do the bubble situation because we don't want to be away from our families that long. That was the argument. They said, you know, Mike Trout was vocal about it. Clayton Kershaw was vocal about it. A lot of guys were. They said, we don't want to be away from our families for that long, to which I responded with, you are usually away from your families for a very large chunk of time anyways during a normal baseball season. This really shouldn't be much different, unless, of course, you're in an outlier situation like Mike Trout happens to be with the birth of his kid. But other than that, I mean, really, I didn't see what this whole complaint was about. Yeah, I get you want to be with your kids, but at the same time, do you want to bring home the bacon too? You know, I think there was a balance there, but the players put the owners and Major League Baseball in a pretty tough position when they refused to do the bubble because of that situation. Now, so is a bubble the right way to go? I think there's certainly some sort of argument to be made, at least for upcoming sports, mainly football. We all want the National Football League to have a complete season. We all want that to happen. We all want college football to do the same as well. We've kind of X'd out the idea of having some sort of bubble amongst college football because it's kind of impossible. You know, I think you could try to do it, but I don't think it would be possible to really enforce. The NFL, you could do it in a bunch of different cities. Also, travel isn't that much taking place that often amongst teams. You travel for half of your games. And honestly, I loved one of the points I saw brought up today, which kind of makes sense too. What if you flew on the day of your game, the morning, and then came back that night? It might not be very convenient, but it is doable, and it could avoid less travel situations, having to stay in hotels and all that. So I think the NFL, again, when I'm looking at them right now, they have to be taking a big look at what's going on with the NBA in a bubble, with Major League Baseball not in a bubble. And they're weighing what's best here. You know, the NHL is about to try to pull off their own bubble situation, which kind of mirrored what Major League Baseball had talked about. And I'll say this, if the NHL, which by the way, so far, we're about to start their games, but they haven't had any positive tests. If they continue to go through like this with their situation where they are in Canada and no positive tests keep coming in, you know, Major League Baseball, the players got to be kicking themselves a little bit, at least the ones that want to play, and say, look, we had that opportunity. We had that opportunity. And look, I was pretty skeptical about the NBA bubble. Simply because when they continued to say we're going to do it all the way starting in through August and all that, I was like, at that time, it seems like it's not going to make as much sense as it might have months ago. But so far, they're making it work, and I got to applaud that. A couple of games happened last night, more games happening this weekend, and so far so good. But back to Major League Baseball, we can't start a trend of postponing entire series here. That's something we have to avoid. Because again, if the testing starts and it keeps going like it should, like I'm saying, you get it in the morning, you get your test results back the next morning, turn it around in 24 hours, you find out if anybody's positive, you kick them out and you keep playing. So something to me is going on with how long it's taking to get their results back and or when they are actually doing the initial testing. I think these are things that Major League Baseball needs to look at. They need to assess this and see what they can fix. Because this is a crazy number. With all the teams that are missing games this week, now with the Cardinals being one of them tonight, that's 30 games that have been postponed. 30 games already. Something's got to be changed here. We have, and I'll say this, because I've talked to people and people have said, hey, what about the whole taxi squad? What about these extra players? In those normal situations that I was describing with the testing, that's when you start bringing guys up. That's when you start bringing young guys up to get some experience, for instance. If you get one or two guys and you know the rest of the team is good, that's when you can start utilizing it. The timing of the game that day plays a ton into it as well, just like, for instance, today with St. Louis. So we can't get into this trend of canceling entire series when we get one or two positive tests. Because guess what? We're getting one or two positive tests at different places, not even in sports all the time, and we don't cancel things. We're done with that. It's the same to me with sports here. That's not a good precedent to start here. Not good at all. So I'm glad Major League Baseball is at least so far allowing St. Louis and the Brewers to keep the series going this weekend. They're throwing those 7-inning doubleheaders onto Sunday. That's a good start. But I also have to say this. Players, I don't care how they got this. I don't care how St. Louis's two players got this. They have to look at this and take it more serious, at least for now. That's all I'm asking. As a Major League Baseball fan, it's let's take this serious right now. If you ever were going to, let's make it right now. So you can keep playing. And Major League Baseball is asking the same thing. The NFL, that's going to be what's going to be interesting about their situation, what they'll do. Because will they pull what Major League Baseball players did and say to the NFL owners, look, we don't want to deal with the bubble situation. Again, they're going to cite because we don't want to be away from our families. If that's going to be the case, it's kind of just like college football here. Fine. But the discipline for these players is going to have to be as strong as ever to stay away from high-risk events. Maybe the NFL is a little different because they've already put protocols in place to try to stop these guys from doing that. But they have to look at what's happening in Major League Baseball and say, if we're going to find a way to play without a bubble, it's really going to come down to a lot of us on our own honor systems doing the right thing when we're away from the field. And that has to be done if we're going to have a full NFL season. That's what I'm looking at now, because we're seeing how Major League Baseball is starting here. Well, I'm thinking ahead to when the NFL decides to kick it off. How are they going to get through without avoiding something like Major League Baseball is? If they do it without a bubble, should we expect some positive tests? Absolutely, there will be. Same with college football. There's going to be more positive tests pop up all season long. But if you can get a majority of guys to get on the same page and take things a lot more serious than some guys are, you might just be able to pull something off. Might just be able to pull something off. Ton of stuff still to get to here today. The ACC's decision, we'll talk a little bit with Hank about that. The SEC obviously deciding, and, of course, the Big 12, still no word about what they plan on doing. Later on in the show, the NBA was back. Also just happened to be back on a crazy story that was released yesterday about the NBA and their China issues. We'll talk about all that. Plus, look later on in the show, one radio host, sports radio host, is finally finished after one of the most prolific careers ever. I'll tell you who that is later on coming up in the show. This is the Afternoon Sports Drive on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network. We'll be back hopefully here with Hank Boulanger from the Big 12 Fanatics podcast next.
Well, I'm not trying to get in the way. Minding my own, got nothing to say about nobody. That's right, nobody. Don't shake my tree, don't rattle my cage. You and me will be on the same page. Got no trouble, don't make no trouble. Yeah, you best let a sleeping dog die, 'cause soon you come to understand why. Hey, you're gonna get bit right between the eyes. Well, let me tell you how it all went down.
Welcome back. Afternoon Sports Drive, Triple Play Sports Radio Network. It's Friday. It is Friday. Thank goodness. We continue to roll on here, and it's actually the final day of July. Unbelievable. We're about to get into August. And as look, I'm going to toot my own horn, as Hank Boulanger, by the way, from the Big 12's Fanatics Point podcast is joining me now. And I got to toot my own horn, Hank, because I said this was going to be the craziest August of all time in sports history. Everything is about to unload and come back at the same time. And guess what? August 1st tomorrow, we've already got NBA, Major League Baseball back. Hockey will be back tomorrow. The PGA Tour. I'm sure there's other things I'm missing, but officially, would you agree that we are, at least for major sports, we are back, right?
Oh, yeah, 100%, Patrick. And, I was thinking about this a little bit earlier today, or it might have been yesterday. It kind of feels like that. There's a time in each year when baseball's going on and basketball's going on at the same time, and it's kind of like a really super fun year. It's a fun area, kind of like March Madness with NBA. Baseball's about to start. It's just kind of the same feeling where, man, all these major sports are coming back. It's kind of bigger. It seems like a bigger deal because you got baseball, you got NBA, hockey starting soon, golf's coming up. It's going to be a very fun month, Patrick.
Yeah, it really is. And the only thing that will make it better is we can get some official word that we're for sure going forward with college football, which, by the way, it looks like we are, at least for most Power Fives, because almost everybody has come out with a plan except the Big 12, believe it or not, which we'll get to. But first, let's start with the ACC. Do you like the move of going the 10 games plus one non-conference? And also, do you like Notre Dame joining the ACC?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Patrick, it's hard for me to wrap my head around that. You know what? I have to quit being selfish, and I have to understand that it's not going to be the way I want it to be. This year is going to be wild. It's going to be crazy. And so I have to understand, Hank, it's not going to be the way I want it. And so is it the way I want it necessarily? No, obviously I'd want a full schedule, everything normal, but that can't happen. And I think what the ACC did was probably the next best thing. I think they got a good one non-conference game, and they do their 10, one non-conference,
right.
10 conference games, and they're adding Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame had to go somewhere, and I think the ACC is the best spot for them. If you listen to my podcast, we kind of talked about, we have a segment where we talk about Notre Dame is one of them, but I think Notre Dame is the best fit in the ACC, especially because they're already in there in basketball. So, to me, I think the ACC did the right thing. But more importantly, Patrick, I'm really looking forward to that Clemson-Notre Dame matchup now.
Yeah, no, that's going to be the favorite, and I'm excited. I'm glad you brought that up because, to me, I said Notre Dame kind of asserts themselves as almost the clear number 2 all of a sudden because the ACC, we all know, doesn't have a ton of super elite talent. So to you, does the Notre Dame insertion there, do they become maybe the second best team in that entire conference now?
Oh, without a doubt. ACC obviously a Power 5 school, and there's good athletes coming there. But let's be honest, the ACC isn't really known so much for their football. I mean, they're obviously a basketball conference. They're not really like the Big Ten or the SEC or even the Big 12 when it comes to football. Now, in basketball, it's a whole different story. But adding a football program like Notre Dame will definitely help them out this year, especially it helps Clemson a ton. Because every year people talk about, Patrick, is how, and Clemson doesn't really play a lot of people. The ACC, yeah, they play good teams, but they're not like the best teams, you know? So I think adding a team like Notre Dame will help Clemson out a lot when it comes to the respect they need to get into the college playoff. So I think for Clemson, and even the whole conference, it works out a lot because you're adding such a major team, like one of the biggest historic teams in the country. So I love the move for the ACC. I mean, I'm not an ACC fan by any means, but I can just tell, like, that's just so good for the conference. And I'm jealous. I wish the Big 12 had something like that.
Hank Boulanger from the Big 12 Fanatics podcast joining me here on the afternoon sports drive. Yeah, see, with the ACC, John Swofford said today that's a win-win for them. But, for instance, if you're a team like this year, North Carolina, okay, they're sitting in the ACC. They've had a pretty good recruiting year. With all this coming together, do they personally, or a team like them, for instance, Florida State, what have you, all of a sudden they're like, wow, our hurdle was Clemson. Now we have Notre Dame thrown in here too, and if a team like North Carolina or somebody like that ends up in the 3 spot, for instance, in the season where they would have been second had Notre Dame not been in there, are they like, wow, this is something weird and actually not looking forward to?
Yeah, I mean, no team's going to back down from a talent. North Carolina, like you said, kind of one of the teams in the ACC that's starting to be up and coming. I mean, there's been some pretty good athletes coming from there for the past few years. So I get what you're saying. Now, from a fan standpoint, I would say yes. I think if you're a big fan, like a Florida State fan, a Miami fan, or a North Carolina fan, those teams that kind of can hang around, or Virginia. Virginia's a good one. They can kind of hold their own in football. But every year they have to try to, like you said, hurdle that Clemson job. So adding a team like Notre Dame, it just adds another hurdle, even a bigger hurdle almost at the point, because it's this big tradition school, kind of like a Texas or like a Michigan or something like that, or Ohio State. So for the fans, yes, it makes it. You got to be a little bit upset by how now not only get to play Clemson, you have to play Notre Dame. But like I said, kind of from a conference standpoint and from a team standpoint, these coaches they want more competition in there as well. You would think. I mean, yeah, it might hurt them a little bit, but it makes your conference look so much better. And if your conference looks so much better, it's going to help you in the future when it comes to the college football playoff. I mean, the biggest thing I can give you for an example, Patrick, is Big 12. I mean, if you think about it, the Big 12 doesn't get as much respect as it should. I mean, the SEC and the Big 10 are the two main conferences that, get everyone's attention. I mean, when you look at it, Oklahoma getting blown out to LSU in the first round of playoffs is not helping the Big 12 at all.
No.
It just makes us look worse. So I think adding that team, adding more competition is going to help the ACC a lot, not only this year, but in the future. If, I don't think Notre Dame will stick around there forever, but like I said, I think it's a good thing. I think it's all positive, especially from a conference standpoint and every team in the conference.
Yeah, no, I'd say this is definitely a one-year deal, barring any future coronavirus issues. So with the SEC, their move yesterday, they go and they kind of pull of a Pac-12 here, and they say we're going to do just a 10-game conference schedule. Was it surprising to you that they didn't do what the ACC did and still try to keep that +1, which for a lot of those teams was an ACC-SEC matchup?
Yeah, very. I thought the SEC out of all the conferences would be that one conference that would definitely have that extra non-conference game. But I was a little surprised. But, Patrick, at the end of the day, I'm just happy that they're not, pushing it back to spring, that they're still planning on trying to start the season at a decent time. So that makes me happy, just alone thinking about that. But, yeah, I agree with you. I thought it was super weird that the SEC was just going strictly just conference and not adding any non-conference games, because I love the games with the SEC and the ACC or SEC and Big Ten or whatever you want. I think those games are the most fun games to watch, especially early in the year. So that's a little disappointing from that standpoint, but I get it. I get why they're doing it, but it came to kind of a shock to me why the SEC out of all the conferences decided to go that route.
Hank Boulanger from the Big 12 Fanatics podcast joining me here on the afternoon sports drive. The big question: what does the Big 12 do? I mean, they just canceled their media day, which was scheduled for Monday. And according to Bob Bowlesby, it's still, we're waiting. We got a board meeting on Monday. We may or may not decide something then. I'll tell you, I'll put it this way for you. So with the ACC and the SEC, we know their respective decisions. Do they lean more towards what the ACC's doing? Do they lean towards what the SEC's doing? Or do they just say, screw it, we're just going to do a normal full schedule?
I mean, if they could do a normal full schedule, Patrick, that'd be the best. But let's be honest, that's probably not going to happen, especially with all these other Power 5 schools doing that. I think that Big 12, Patrick, has to do the way the ACC does. He has to have that extra non-conference team because if you think about it, the SEC doesn't really need to in a way because they're the SEC.
Right.
Those teams are already thought super high up. There's already 3 teams, 4 teams who already have people are talking about 4 teams in the SEC that could go to the college football playoffs. You can't say that about any other conference, really. And the SEC is probably the only conference that can maybe have 2 teams in the playoffs. So maybe besides the Big Ten, but mostly just the SEC. So if you're the Big 12, I think you have to have one out-of-conference game just to kind of maybe get a little bit more momentum, and maybe a Big 12 school can maybe have an ACC team on their non-conference schedule and hopefully get a victory just to give you more pride of the conference. And hopefully when the college football playoff starts and those guys are looking at who can we go, hey, this Big 12 team defeated that ACC team, why not them, kind of thing. So I think the Big 12, in order to get the respect they need, I think having that extra non-conference game would be very beneficial.
Could you see them doing even like the ACC where they say you can have that one non-conference game, but it still has to be in the same state, for instance? Would that make more sense for the Big 12 to do?
That's a tough question, Patrick, because I look at Texas and I think, yes, Texas could do it. But then I look at K-State or KU. I mean, they can't do that. They can't. They'd have to play maybe like Missouri, but they can't even play Missouri. So it makes it difficult for the K-State, Iowa, even Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, really. I think all the schools in Texas could maybe pull it off, but I think that would make it very difficult if they were just limited to their state or even really just the area. I think even the area with KU, K-State, Iowa State, kind of that Kansas City-ish, northern-ish part, that would make it very difficult. But, that'd be sweet, but I don't think they can just do that. I think they have to reach out a little bit, maybe go to a little bit different region. Hopefully not far, but just a little bit. Yeah,
you'd probably have to be digging a little bit and see what even FCS school you could probably grab on at that point.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
You like North Dakota State or South Dakota, one of those schools. That'd probably be a good fit for the teams like K-State, KU, Iowa State, kind of thing.
Yeah, so you make a good point because for those states, there's not a ton, that they have option-wise. Let's shift over here to Major League Baseball. It's a big topic today, but first, I didn't talk to you about the whole Marlins situation. How Marlins was it for them to have now, 18 or 19 guys be testing positive for the coronavirus? And in my opinion, they put the league in jeopardy by what they did there.
Yeah, definitely. The Marlins did a Marlins thing. Like you said, I like how you said that. But no, definitely, it's what they did. It's very unfortunate, Patrick. That all those guys tested positive, and it really kind of put a halt because I thought everything was going good, and then of course oh my gosh, here we go. What was it? It was like 4 days into the season when all that came out. So it was pretty upsetting, and of course it was Miami. So that's kind of the way I was thinking.
Look, I kind of put it like this, and I'm curious what you think, but to me it's just another example of from the top to the bottom here how a franchise is kind of run. We know that bad franchises, it's not just the talent that's on the field, because I bring up the Cleveland Browns, for instance. On paper, they're a really talented team, yet look at all the issues they consistently have. Well, it's kind of the same with the Miami Marlins. I feel like that a team that's not run well from the very top to the very bottom has these types of issues, and it comes to nobody's shock that it would be a team like that would be the one to say, we don't really care, we're going to do what we do here, and if the whole league falls because of it, so what?
Yeah, Patrick, you can say that just about almost anything. You can say that about a football team, a baseball team. You can say that about a normal business.
Yeah.
If it's not well run at the very top, down below with people who are working for you, anything like that, they're going to do the same thing. That's just simple business management kind of thing. So, I totally agree that if it's not run well at the top, kind of like Miami is, it can become devastating, and it did. This was a perfect example of that.
So with St. Louis having 2 tests positive, they actually got those results last night and are having to have this game postponed that was scheduled for today, but the series is still a go. Do you like that Major League Baseball, at least with the way they're handling it, it isn't, we're going to have to shut everything down. Like, for instance, St. Louis right now, they're still planning on getting these 3 games in this weekend. Do you think that's the right way to go?
Yes, 100%. And if I'm right, Patrick, isn't it? It's not a player; it's just a coach and a staff member, or something like that.
That was the initial report, and then the last one I saw said 2 players is what it was. So I don't know exactly who is. There's reports for both, and I thought that if it wasn't players, they might have found a way to still play the game. But I think that when I heard one of the people in St. Louis, they had talked about, and they said that they even knew at some point that it was actually 2 pitchers. So there's reports out there, but regardless, it's 2 amongst the team.
Yeah, like you were saying, Patrick. I think you got to push the play this week, and I don't think you don't need to freak out. And Patrick, when I saw that post, I should have looked at the comments. I don't know why I did. I knew he was going to make me mad.
Yeah.
But I looked at the comments, and then everyone was like, "Oh, you got to cancel the season."
Right.
Instantly, I wish people would just relax that MLB has a plan for this. They are prepared for this kind of stuff. Rob Manfred, they went through the whole entire thing of preparing for this exact moment, for stuff like this to happen. Okay? If you think about it, the Miami Marlins organization is the only organization that had a ton of players do it. Every other team is maybe just minimum has 2 or 3 guys. I mean, the Phillies have a couple, I think, or they did.
And they weren't even players.
Minimal. Yeah, it's super. It's very. People are just freaking out about it. It's like, oh my gosh, a coach and a staff member got COVID. They got to cancel the season. This will not work. I just want people to relax. Take a chill pill. It's okay. It's going to happen. It's going to happen more throughout the season. More teams are going to get it. Patrick, I'd almost make a bet with you right now that probably at least 15 teams this year will probably have a case in during the season. They're prepared for that.
Yeah.
And I wish people would just kind of just relax and know that it's going to happen. It's going to be okay. Okay, they're going to take a few days off. They're going to make sure everyone's safe, and they'll move on. And I think this will be the same thing with the Cardinals. They'll make sure that they're taking the right precautionary steps to get players back on the field, and they will. And I think it's going to be fine. I think, they should finish that series this weekend if everything works out.
Hank Boulanger from the Big 12 Fanatics podcast here on the Afternoon Sports Drive. With Major League Baseball not being in a bubble, I know that you and I are big-time NFL fans, and that's the next one up besides college football. But does the NFL look at this and say, we got to find some way to do either a bunch of individual little bubbles or bubble cities or something like that to minimize the risk? Because what we're seeing is Major League Baseball players said they didn't want a bubble. Well, we all knew that meant the players were going to have a lot of responsibility of themselves to keep themselves away from potential risk here. That's obviously not the case for everybody at this time. So does the NFL look at this and go, you know what? Maybe we should really try to consider this.
I think they should consider it, Patrick, but that is going to be that would be the hardest job to do for the NFL, I think. And same thing with the MLB. I know that was talked on the MLB for a little bit, and I think for the NBA it worked out great. But the NBA does not have the same amount of players that the baseball has or NFL has.
Right.
It's a complete different number. So I think being able to pull that off, especially in the NFL with a bubble, is insane. I think that would just be too difficult. I don't think it'd work out. There'd be so many problems. If it could, great. If they can have some options to do that and they can work it out, awesome. But they should. But again, that would be so difficult, and I don't see that happening. Do you? I think that's pretty hard to do.
Yeah, I buy more of the idea about multiple bubble sites and not just not even just 1 or 2. I'm talking you could probably have one for every team if you're being honest, because when you look at the travel amongst NFL teams, it's really not that much. It's half of your season, and I think you could probably even cut it down to that if you go on the same day. So it's definitely doable. I would be okay personally if they went ahead and just did what Major League Baseball is doing, and they're like, okay, we're not going to do it. But at the same time, players, especially in the NFL, because they don't have as many games, have to take this 100% serious and not put themselves in any type of risk. Because if they do, you're talking about especially a big-time player. I mean, imagine having your quarterback, all of a sudden he tests positive 2 days before the game, and you've got him out for a big-time division game. I mean, it's just something that cannot happen. In baseball, I think you can all of a sudden get away with it a little bit still because you have so many games. Even in a shortened season, you can still kind of get away with it. You can feel it a little bit more. But football is so much different to me in that aspect that if they do go ahead with no bubble, I mean, it's going to have to be, guys, we have to get this going, and you have to be the most disciplined that you've ever been off the field, which you and I can understand. I mean, I would imagine, especially for college players too, but we're seeing it with pro players. That's not. I mean, it's so much easier said than done, right? To be disciplined off the field.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's. I would hate to be a coach right now. That not only do you have to be a coach and with being with these young men all the time, you have to make sure that what they're doing outside of football practice and meetings and everything like that they are staying safe and they're being smart and they're not putting themselves at risk to ruin the whole entire season for the whole entire team. For college football, I think it's a little bit more difficult, obviously, but for the NFL, it's just as big of a deal. It's a bigger deal. I mean, man, games count so much at the NFL. I mean, you only got 16 games, and if the quarterback goes to a restaurant or something like that, comes back and tests positive a couple days before a game, I mean, geez, that's going to be insane. That's going to be so hard for coaches. That's going to be very difficult. I can already, in my mind, imagine a player just going on a player getting tested positive and a coach being like, hey, I think we should hide this. You play, and then we'll say you tested positive after, or something like that.
Yeah, well,
I can see all these scandals and lying and all this stuff just because football is such a different sport compared to the NBA and college basketball and college football and baseball. I think some. I mean, we've seen it before with the Patriots and how everything. We won't get into that, but it's such a different game from that aspect.
Yeah, Paul Feinbaum brought up that topic about could that even happen in college football at some point? Could a coach, hide a positive test from everybody else? And
I think 100% coaches would.
Yeah, I mean it's something that a lot of people and even I were like, no, you're crazy at first. But the more you think about it, I mean, would we put it past some of these coaches? I mean, completely. If it's a big game. I don't know. I think it's, like you said, it's definitely something that, if they could find a way to hide it, but the fallout, if they were found out, would be very bad. It'd be unbelievably detrimental. Yeah. Okay, last thing here with you here while I have you. The NFL, we get the news coming on right before the show that Antonio Brown is receiving an 8-game suspension amongst the NFL there, and he's still awaiting, obviously, the hearing for that sexual assault allegation and everything else. So if that clears, and let's say he gets away with that for now, if he's cleared of all that and he comes in with the 8 games, does a team pick him up? Because still right now, even though his hearing is until September, he can still actually go into a training camp if a team picks him up and work out in the training camp until the season starts. Does a team pull the trigger on Antonio Brown?
No. 100%. Right off the bat, no. Pat, this is the same thing I've been saying down for a year now.
Yeah.
He is not worth it. He's really not. He is not worth the risk of putting your team in jeopardy of just media, bad publicity, and all that kind of stuff. He's not worth it. I don't see how he's worth it. I think people disagree with me. People also agree with me. Antonio Brown's a great wide receiver, but there's a line that can be crossed to, I don't care how good you are and how good your talent is, you bring the team down, this kind of thing, if that makes sense. So to me, he is not worth it. I don't know if you agree with me or not, but I cannot be okay with having Antonio Brown on my roster, because what if he does the same thing he did in Oakland? What if it's ridiculous. I can't get behind it. I don't wish bad for him. I still want him to play, but I don't see a GM putting risk on getting Antonio Brown. And he's probably going to cost a little bit too.
Oh, he would, and that's the thing too. Is I want him to get some help first of all, because I think he needs it, and I still think there's an extremely talented football player somewhere in there. I mean, we did see it in the one game he got in last year with New England. I mean, he still looked good, and I think that there's still a really talented player. But first and foremost, I want him to get the help that he needs, because honestly, it still comes. He comes in the league. I think he's asserted into a top 5 receiver role. I know he hasn't played in a while, but his talent is that good to me. I just don't know, especially like we're seeing reports that some of these guys are saying, hey, we want this guy. Does a coach and a team officially, do they listen to their players like, you know what, okay, maybe, I don't know. It's really tough. It'd be a tough trigger to pull because, again, the fallout could be really, really bad. You could disrupt your entire franchise. Hank, I appreciate it as always, man. Hey, I got to tell you, too, congratulations, soon-to-be dad, man. That's awesome. I can't wait for that. You're going to have a baby girl. I said to you off the air, man, that is, you're making me feel like a really old dude over here, because it doesn't feel like that long ago you and I were doing our thing in college together, and you got everything going, man. I'm happy for you, and hope everything goes well with that.
Hey, thanks, Patrick. I really appreciate it, dude. It's going to be a fun month. I'll tell you what. She'll be here before I know it. So, yeah, it's going to be a blast. I can't wait.
Yeah, I'll make sure that when I meet her sometime here, I'll tell her that Uncle Patrick was the one that always put Hank in his place when it came to the sports talking points and all that.
Definitely. Well, hey, I already got on my K-State gear for it.
Oh boy,
great.
She never had a chance, did she?
No, never.
I love it, man. That's awesome. Hey, Hank, as always, I appreciate it, man.
Hey, thanks, Patrick. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Hank Boulanger, find him on Twitter, call_me_Hanky. Check out his podcast, the Big 12 Fanatics Podcast, wherever you listen to your podcast. It's a really good one. I know he's going to try to get me on here at some point. We're trying to work out our schedules where I'll join him there soon. And, yeah, it's really good. It's really good if you want Big 12 news. A lot of good, interesting takes from him and his guys there. All things Big 12. They talk about every team. They got a lot of different guys around the area. So, yeah, it's good stuff. Check it out. As always, appreciate him coming on. When we come over the break here to end out the hour, we're going to get to the ACC and the SEC because somebody amongst them is not friends with the other. We'll talk about that next.
I don't wanna wait for our life to be over. You have it, but you take it how you left it. This is giving paid. Take your time, take me under.
Welcome back, Afternoon Sports Drive, Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler here with you on Friday.
In the plane out of Southern California.
Sitting here on 1020 AM, 1580 AM, 93.1 FM, 93.3 FM, 105.1 FM, tripleplaysportsradio.com, Triple Play Sports Radio app. Lots of ways to listen in. Wherever you are, however you're listening, we appreciate it. Thank you so much for spending some of your Friday with me. All right, so I'm going to move the ACC-SEC talk to the top of the second hour, looking at more of the Cardinals situation, looking at their official statement that they posted on their Twitter account. So this is kind of where it again makes me question the timing of the tests, which I think is the big issue here. Because again, they admit that we learned late last night that 2 players tested positive. That testing was conducted on Wednesday. They don't say a time though. So you have to think, if they did go ahead and test that Wednesday morning, then it took over 24 hours to get the results back. And the initial response has been that it has been 24 hours or less for most of these results to get back. So if they took those tests on Wednesday morning, didn't get them back till Thursday night, that's where the problem lies on how quick these tests are returning. Because when you look at the timing of the game that was supposed to take place today, if they had gotten those tests back Thursday morning and found out they had 2 positives, well, then they could immediately test again, have those results back on Friday morning, 24 hours later, and still probably could have been good to go for the game on Friday afternoon. I just think it's something that's possible. It would take a lot of turnaround, but if these initial tests aren't taking place at the right time, then when you get in a situation where you have a matinee game like today, then it forces a postponement, which is something you don't want. You can deal with it, but disrupting the flow to what the Cardinals were getting into and all that is not something you want. And I think it's something Major League Baseball needs to truly look at and make sure that testing is done immediately in the morning so you get those results back hopefully the next morning. If they're having some type of issue with their company that's getting them the testing about how long it's taking, well, then that has to be dealt with them and fixed, because this can't happen more than once. Rapid testing was done today amongst the entire traveling party with St. Louis, and on top of that, they also had contact tracing being done. So you're probably going to get as many found out today as anything if contact tracing is immediately taking place. The other good news is, and why they can still continue this series, they never went to Miller Park. It's still called Miller Park? I think for some reason it changed, now that I think about that, in Milwaukee. But now it's still Miller Park. They never went there, which is good news, because then you don't have to be like, okay, because if they had done that, we'd be talking about a postponement of the entire series this weekend. We'd say they have to shut down, they got to clean out that dugout, wherever else St. Louis was in. So luckily, Luckily, they didn't go in and infiltrate the ballpark or anywhere else with these two positives, because we'd be talking about a lot of different situation. Which is kind of interesting to me, because that's maybe the silver lining in all of this. It was a good thing they did find out last night instead of this morning, because they might have already been at the ballpark before those results came in. Who knows? That could have been a really bad situation. The Brewers wouldn't be next in line to have games postponed, and the domino effect keeps going. So that's definitely the good news, and it's going to afford them a chance to play this series this weekend starting tomorrow and a doubleheader on Sunday. But something definitely has to be done in terms of the testing time there. That's what I'm getting from all this. With games that are going to take place at noon, we got to have a quicker turnaround there in case something like this does happen. Now, I know there's probably people that are like, oh, he sat there and he ripped the Miami Marlins for their incompetence and their players not doing the right thing. And I will tell you right now, I'll do the exact same thing to St. Louis if we ever find out that it was two players and who they were. They're not going to be off the hook just because they're my favorite team. If there's two guys that were screwing around outside of the game in a high-risk situation, they're next up. Because we all know at this point, if everybody looks at what Miami did and still can't understand the importance of switching up a lifestyle for a little while, we're not asking for your entire life. Think about this time compared to the rest of your entire life. If you were ever going to change it up, do so now. It won't be that big of a deal. You will thank everybody in the long run that you listened to that advice. If you have the responsibility that comes with being an athlete at any level right now, major league and college, not only your season depending on it, but everybody else's too, I would be taking this thing extremely serious. As much as I want to go live my life, which I have been advocating for this entire time, I want guys to go out there and live their life. I hate it that some guys don't get to experience the same type of college life that everybody else did. But that's what comes with an unprecedented time. We're asking you to do some things you're not used to. So come out of your comfort zone, switch some things up, and it's for the benefit of yourself and everybody else. That's it. That's it, bottom line. And it goes from the top to the bottom, major league to college to high school, wherever. If you want to play sports this year, you got to take some responsibility. In hour number 2, the ACC and the SEC trading punches? We'll talk about that next.
It's been a too long time with no peace of mind. I'm ready for the times to get better. I've got to tell you, I've been racking my brain, hoping to find a way out. I've had enough of this continual rain. Changes are coming, no doubt. It's been a too long time with no peace of mind, and I'm ready for the times to get better. You seem to want from me what
Hour number 2, Afternoon Sports Drive, Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler here on Friday. Coming to you live.
I have a dream that I wish I could.
Hope everybody's having a great Friday so far.
It's burning holes.
Some good weekend plans going on.
It's been a too long time. No peace.
There was actually a cold front that came through last night in July, and I'm beyond thankful for it here in Stillwater. As we get ready for the weekend, you're at the right spot. 1 hour left here on Triple Play Sports Radio Network to get you through. To start off this hour, we have had so much back and forth amongst what conferences are going to do in the Power 5, what are they going to do regarding a football season, regarding a schedule. Look, it seemed like the SEC for a long time was going to be number one in terms of looking towards a full season. Now, what I'm getting from this with them only going to a 10-game conference-only season which there's been reports from the Pac-12 or the Big Ten, I should say, too, that, yeah, we put it out there that it was obviously about the health concerns, which I think part of it is, but two, it's about scheduling. Because, yes, if you look at it now, the SEC can do exactly what the Pac-12 and the Big Ten is doing, and that is control much more within their conference. Which I understand that. But it's almost glaring a little bit that we get some news from the Big 12 or the Pac-12 and the Big 10 saying, look, we're going to hide that, though, underneath the pandemic issues here. We're going to say that it's about health, but I'm telling you right now, they are thrilled by being able to keep everything within conference. And the SEC is too. But I think Hank brought up a good point when he was on with me there in hour number one. The SEC doesn't care. You know, they're fine playing just SEC games. And I think that that's fair to say now, simply because we don't know if there's going to be fans in the stands this year for any of these teams. We don't know if that's for sure. We've heard reports that some are going to try to allow it. We just don't know yet, though, completely if that's going to work or not. If the SEC knew that every single school was going to be able to have fans packed in there, that's one thing. You know, you don't cancel those games because you get that cash coming in. But with that still being up in the air, it plays into it more for why they just don't care, because they don't really need to. So the ACC, with their decision to go ahead and have that one non-conference game, a lot of it was on their expectation of the SEC to keep that as well because of those ACC-SEC matchups that would still be intact. John Swofford says today, ACC commissioner, that he's not necessarily disappointed with the SEC's decision, he's just disappointed in general. Let me translate that to you. He's pissed. He has to be. Under his impression, it seems as though it's coming off that what the ACC did was hindering that the SEC would do the exact same thing. That way they could keep those games. Because guess what? When the ACC heard what the SEC did yesterday, they were probably like, are you joking me? We had this all planned out so that we could keep that one game for a lot of those teams, those in-state rivalries. Why do you think the ACC said you can have that non-conference game, but it has to be within the state? Because they were going to do those SEC games. And the Southeastern Conference put up a huge middle finger to the ACC and said, we don't care. Doesn't affect us. No fans are going to be here. No big deal. And the ACC got screwed out of it. Because now they're going to have to go find different teams that no one cares about watching them play. Nobody cares about that. More people cared about Georgia Tech. More people cared about Florida State. All these other ones? Nah, not really. Not really. Heck, there might not even be ACC fans that really care about that. So it brings up the argument again, should college football and the Power Fives have a singular form of leadership? Because they don't. It's every conference for themselves in the FBS and the Power Fives. And you get situations like this. If you had a commissioner or somebody that was set in place to make these decisions solely for everybody, you don't think there would have been the possibility of let's have everybody do what the ACC's doing, that +1 model? That way we can keep some of these games on the schedule? Because they're not earth-shattering matchups, but they're still good. They're still rivalries. They're still fun to watch. And it's good competition. So if there was a singular form of leadership amongst college football and the FBS, I would have to think this would be worked out a lot better than it is, because you've got every Power 5 basically saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and oh, we don't care if it affects you, by the way. Remember, we used to talk, there was always talk about how the Power 5 is always on the same page. These guys love each other. They run everything in college sports, and in football, they're definitely on the same page. Are we sure about that? Because we're seeing time and time again that they seem to be not on the same page. And I think that this is a problem. I mean, if you're the ACC commissioner and you were expecting the SEC to go through with it, and they, like I said, that's just a huge middle finger. They're telling the ACC to go take a flying leap, and now they're having to scramble to find teams again. So with all the conversation in that area, does the Big 12 wait here and take advantage of something? Do they take advantage of what's going on amongst those two and say, let's control the headlines? Because yes, we will get some negative feedback. That's inevitable. But if we go through with the full schedule, there are going to be plenty of people, too, that are like, the Big 12's got it going on. Wow. The Big 12's got it going on. They're finding a way to, and you know what? It would come off even better if they go through with the non-conference schedule and there's not this huge outbreak of tests. We don't know. Huge outbreak of positive tests. Could be, could not. But if there isn't, the Big 12 shines. Imagine being Bob Bowlesby at the end of this year, okay? Let's fast forward to the end of this season and think about what he would be feeling if the Big 12 stuck to it, went through a full non-conference schedule, went through a full schedule, and at the end of the year, they're the lone Power 5 to do it, and everything's pretty successful, all that. I mean, he would look like, would there be an argument for him to dethrone Greg Sankey as the college football kingpin? Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot at stake here for the Big 12. Again, if I've got to put money on it, if I'm betting on this, I would have to think they're going to pull something like the ACC. I don't necessarily see going with the full non-conference being scrapped. Because I, again, was surprised by the SEC, but I get it simply off what I just stated earlier. The Big 12, though, don't they really, if you're being honest, wouldn't they like at least one non-conference game before they jumped into conference play? I mean, I think they definitely would. I think most teams would. I think Oklahoma State would like to get in the game against Tulsa. Just to see what's going on, to see what we have. The SEC, in another way here, how they're going to benefit. The Pac-12 as well, the Big 10. If the Big 12 goes through with this, everyone's going to sit back and watch. If the Big 12 has games on August 29th, everybody's going to be sitting back and watching and saying, here's what we're going to get to do. We're going to see what goes wrong and what goes right. And if things go wrong, it makes the SEC and the ACC and the Pac-12 and the Big 10 look that much better to a lot of people, even though it doesn't necessarily mean that's the case. So in a way, I think you can understand why the Big 12 is pushing Media Day off and why they're still talking. Because they're weighing all this. You know, there's benefits in being the last to make a decision, but there's also going to be a chance at some negative consequences too, as Bob Bowlesby is very well aware of. Very well aware of. I said yesterday, maybe, because I at that point was still expecting media days to take place and all, maybe the Big 12 dumps it on tonight. They dump their decision on a Friday night. It goes over the weekend, and we talk about it on Monday with the media day. But now they're going through and going to go all the way into next week, may not even come up with an answer. I mean, look, would I be 100% surprised if they meet on Monday and don't come back with an answer? No, I mean, I honestly wouldn't. They probably should, since, we're actually getting into August. It'll be August 3rd. And if they plan on playing games 26 days from then, we probably should get an answer Monday. But the way that the Big 12 has stuck to, which I give them credit for, stuck to their ideas of, we are going to wait until the very, 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 very last minute, no, I wouldn't be surprised. Wouldn't be surprised. The ACC and the SEC throwing punches, because they may not have actually had an exchange war of words, but we can tell. It's not hard to tell that John Swofford was taken by surprise and really upset with the SEC's decision, and rightfully so. But when the SEC is the big bully, guess what they're going to do? They're going to bully, even in situations like this. Why? Because they can, and they don't care. But when they're in that position to do so, just like Hank said, when they're the ones that every year have that ability to put 2 into the college football playoff, well, competition talks loud. Success talks loud. Makes a lot of people listen up, too, doesn't it? All right, when we come back, the NBA was back last night. It's definitely a move forward. There were 2 games that took place. I'll talk about them a little bit. Also coming up, one player is coming back into the league, yes or no? And one player definitely isn't. I'll tell you all about that still to come in the afternoon sports drive.
Levitating off the blacktop. Used to struggle getting started, now I can't stop. Used to be the quiet kid in the sandbox, now it's hands up every time that your man rocks. They ought to stop me coming in again. You mad?
Welcome back, Afternoon Sports Drive, Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler with you on Friday. It's Friday.
Swimming in. From where I'm sitting, contenders are looking like fruit spinning.
Just in, Major League Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred warns the NFLPA, or the MLBPA, that the season could be shut down if they don't take the coronavirus more serious, if they don't manage it better. Look, I want to say this. If it turns out that part of the issue here, because I want to dive in and look at this, and I'm going to try to over the weekend and see if there's any news about it, but I want to dive into the testing situation with what St. Louis is dealing with right now. If it turns out that that was one of the issues here with what's going on with the Cardinals, then that's one thing. Rob Manfred needs to help fix that. We've already gone through what I'm talking about there. But if it's like he's saying, and players aren't taking it serious off the field, then yeah, he has the right to say that. I mean, I don't want to think that players were this whole time thinking like the Marlins and everybody else, let's see how far we can get and see what we can get away with until Rob Manfred threatens to shut things down. I mean, because it didn't take long. What are we, a couple weeks? This is like week 2 of the season. And he's already threatened to shut it down. That's when I saw this news. Look, that's what I was worried about. I didn't think that there would be like this immediate we gotta cancel type situation when we get the news about St. Louis this morning, but I was worried that Rob Manfred at some point here soon, if more tests keep coming in, is going to jump to the conclusion and going to actually get out there and say, we're going to shut it down if you guys can't get it done. And that's when I saw that news because, like Hank said, earlier this morning, when it first broke, it was that it was a clubhouse attendant and somebody else. It wasn't players among St. Louis. Well, it shifted that, in fact, it has been 2 players that tested positive. If it were just a couple of them, that's one thing. I don't think that's a huge, as big of an issue. But when you get the news that it's 2 more players again, that has to make you assume that they probably were not following guidelines put in place. Unfortunately, but that's what you draw from this. Because the way that Major League Baseball has put protocols in, and from what I can see for the most part, players are adhering to, look, there's the occasional high five still. There's the occasional guy spitting still. But I think for the most part, Major League Baseball players are doing a good job on the field of taking precautions. So it leaves you to assume that those that are testing positive are doing so because of what they've done on their own outside of the sport, outside of the field. So maybe this right here that Rob Manfred is saying, his threat serves as a wake-up call to everybody else. If anybody thought about not taking it serious, maybe now this will do it. I mean, it worries me because I'm not convinced that we won't have some more positive tests among Major League Baseball before it's all said and done. But do 2 more positive tests on a team force Rob Manfred to shut it down because of he's got to back up his threat here? I mean, that's DEFCON 0. Like, that's worst case scenario. But, also in a way, leave it to Rob Manfred to, even at this point early on, because look at the percentage of total players that have tested positive here. If it was just St. Louis that had 2 positives and the Marlins hadn't done what they did, I don't think it would warrant this threat as early on as Rob Manfred is coming on and saying. But because the Marlins have literally had almost 20 people, like 60% of their team, test positive because they're idiots, well, that probably didn't help. And especially with a guy like Rob Manfred, who we all know is a complete bonehead commissioner, he would come out and say something this early. He in case you haven't noticed, he's all about the optics in a lot of ways, except that his optics are a lot different than everybody else's. Hence the Astros situation. He thinks he's looking good in some of the decisions he makes, but guess what? He's really not, and everybody knows it. So Major League Baseball has been put on notice. Players better get it together if they're not taking it serious. If they don't, I'll just say this, the season's gonna be canceled if they don't, because Rob Manfred is that guy that will pull the trigger even if it is too early. All right, shifting over to the NFL. Or pardon me, the NBA, actually. Getting over to the NBA. Coming back last night, 2 games officially, more games today. A lot more games going on today and into the weekend. The big story coming out of last night, both games were close, the Jazz and the Pelicans, and the Clippers and the Lakers. But what we did see out of that first game, look, part of this was when the NBA put out their format, we initially jumped on it and realized that the Pelicans were getting a chance to get in because the NBA wants Zion to try to find a way to get to play LeBron. That's what they want. But last night, it comes down to crunch time. Zion ends up playing only 15 minutes in the entire game, and he ends up being set in crunch time because they want to restrict his minutes and not have him hurt himself. Look, this is why people don't watch the NBA anymore, because of things like this. There's a lot of other reasons too, but also because of load management and minute restrictions. I get you want to keep a young guy healthy for your team, but you're telling me he couldn't have gone in for the last couple of possessions? He shot like 6 for 8. 13 points, I think it was. He was shooting lights out from the field in the limited time he had. You're telling me it wouldn't be okay for him to go in for a couple more possessions? I mean, that's why people don't want to watch. When load management started becoming such a big deal in the NBA, people stopped watching. Because also, big networks like ESPN that had those games scheduled, they would get the word that a player wasn't playing, a star player wasn't going to play because of load management. And they'd be like, okay, we're sitting here having to air this game and no one's going to watch. I mean, it's one of the many reasons that ratings continue to tank in the NBA. Which, by the way, they weren't great last night. They weren't great by any stretch of the imagination. Now, the basketball, the product was good, but leaving your star player, your young player like Zion out because of load management is asinine. It makes no sense. Nobody will watch if that continues. The NBA keeps shooting themselves in the foot. Other than that, a lot more going on. But what was also interesting, I hit on it the very last minute yesterday with Tom. ESPN released this bombshell report. I mean, it was a bombshell report on the NBA. And it got, like, no attention. And I was actually pretty shocked that ESPN dropped it on the same day that the NBA was returning. I couldn't believe that. Because we know, like I said yesterday, ESPN and the NBA, they're in bed together. If you turn on ESPN at any given moment, what are they covering? The NBA. That's who they are. So with that being the case, I was pretty shocked to see that on the day of the return, they released this report about the issues going on with the NBA in China. Now, these were issues none of us had ever heard of. Most people understand the hypocrisy being put on by the NBA, so much so that Missouri Senator Josh Hawley calls the NBA out on it. Other politicians have questioned why the NBA won't condemn China or pull out of China. Because we all know what the situation going on over there is like. It is absolutely out of this world insane what's going on in China right now. The coronavirus news has trumped it because it's what's covered the most, but the situation in China is out of control. It's a whole other world over there. It's out of control. There are concentration camps with 1 million plus Muslims in these concentration camps. Hong Kong has virtually been wiped off. Democracy is not allowed. And that's what's crazy is that Daryl Morey, when he made the tweet, Houston Rockets GM made that tweet to free Hong Kong, right? Democracy in Hong Kong. People immediately saw the response was China said, we're going to pull the games. We're going to threaten to pull all the games off airwaves in China. Everything will be taken away from you in the NBA here in China if you don't condemn Daryl Morey for what he said, because here in China we don't believe in democracy. They asked LeBron about it. He ripped Daryl Morey. They asked Steve Kerr about it. He said it was a touchy situation. Later on this year, Commissioner Adam Silver in the NBA says they have mutual respect for China. Even though it is a 100% communist party over there that is just completely spitting in the face of human rights. That's why people are calling out the NBA, saying, why are they not, if they're talking about all the issues going on in the United States, which is fine, right? They can talk about all the issues going on. But they can't do the same thing with China, who they happen to have a huge investment with, and that's why they won't. But at what point does money not become as important as standing up for what's right? Well, the NBA's blinding hypocrisy was finally unveiled even more by ESPN, out of all places, which is what got me. That's what shocked me. They write this piece about how over there in China, there's been basketball academies with the NBA logo all over it. They're a part of it. Chinese coaches over there reportedly were physically abusing and verbally abusing some players. One of the academies had to be shut down because of it. One of a former NBA employee compared it and said it was like Nazi Germany over there. That's what he said. That was his quote. So the ESPN releases this story yesterday. I read through and tried to find where ESPN even talked about it later in the day. It was mentioned on one show, on Highly Questionable. It was mentioned on one show. It was just shocking that all that came out on the day of the return of all days. And ESPN had nothing to say about it other than what they wrote. So, yeah, there's definitely a problem. I mean, China, the situation over there is absolutely nuts. And the NBA being in bed with China, that's scary. It's scary. The games were good, like I said. I think they'll be good tonight. I'll definitely be paying attention to the Houston Rockets. Why, you ask? Because I'm a Russell Westbrook fan. And I definitely follow him wherever he goes now that he's gone from Oklahoma City. I'm sure that many people around here are still Russell Westbrook fans. At least I hope you are. May not be since he switched teams, but the Thunder, for everybody around here, they play tomorrow at 2:30 against the Jazz. 2:30 tomorrow for all the Oklahoma City Thunder fans listening. Yeah, so pretty interesting situation with the NBA. Pretty interesting. Now look, I'll give them credit because the bubble seems to be working. The bubble seems to be working. All right. So one NFL player opted out the other day, and I said I would talk about it more because I didn't really get a chance to. But the biggest name to probably opt out this season in the NFL so far has to be Damian Williams. People that didn't know his name last year knew it probably at least from the Super Bowl. Knew it from the Super Bowl because of what he did there. His story is really incredible. Undrafted free agent, finds his way into Kansas City, ends up being, in my mind, one of the, if not the most valuable player besides Patrick Mahomes amongst the entire Super Bowl run last year. And he opts out this season, cited the pandemic and his mom has cancer. And look, I said that I understand, like I would never say that you're necessarily making the wrong decision by opting out, but I do stand by my point that I've made this entire time. It does seem like being with an organization like the NFL, like Major League Baseball, like the NBA, and if you do it the right way, like colleges, seems to be the safest spot to be to avoid the coronavirus, if you think about it. Now, I know a lot of that hinges on the individual person's actions, but you do have access to a lot more testing. Protocols are put in place. Safety measures are there. Wouldn't it seem like it makes more sense for, not necessarily Damian Williams here, but other NFL players too that have opted out, wouldn't it make more sense to actually stick with the season simply because you're going to be cared for better there? And even if you got the coronavirus, you would at least find out. If you're over there by yourself, you're not going to find out unless you go get yourself tested. So that's kind of been my blowback to some of these guys saying they don't want to play. Now look, these guys that have had pre-existing conditions before, fine, I get it. You don't want to put yourself in that situation. I don't blame them for that. If they feel that that's a huge risk to them, then fine. That is not an issue. And Damian Williams, look, not an issue. I think he was a huge part of what Kansas City did last year, and guess what? If his career ends because of this decision to not play, which I don't know if it necessarily will end, but it will be hindered, then he had a heck of a run and can say, I was a big part of why we won the Super Bowl. And that's pretty impressive. But I will say this, for Chiefs fans, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is about to slide into a huge role. Everyone remembers him out of LSU last year, getting drafted in the first round, the only running back to go in the first round. For all you fantasy football players out there, be ready to steal Clyde Edwards-Helaire. By the way, I know football drafts are actually not too far away in fantasy. That's my first tip. Be ready to steal Clyde Edwards-Helaire as a flex option or even as an RB2. I mean, he's going to be a stud, I truly believe, with the Kansas City Chiefs. So for a lot of teams, if their starting running back were to say, I'm going to opt out, think about all the stud starting running backs in the NFL. If someone like Derrick Henry or Christian McCaffrey or Aaron Jones or Todd Gurley, I mean, go down the list. Dalvin Cook, Saquon Barkley. If all these guys, if some of them said, I'm not opting out, there would be more teams that would be in a lot more trouble than Kansas City. Let me just say that. You want to be sure you have a guy next up. I think there was some people that talked about, well, for Kansas City, it might be Darwin Thompson that gets that role. I don't think so. I really don't. He's had limited chances, but in those limited chances, he hasn't really done much. I'm not sure he's ready for a full load of work, and I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is. He fits into this offense perfectly, and I think it's going to be fun to watch. But I do feel for Damian Williams. He feels like he's got to opt out in this situation, and I feel for him not just because he's missing out on another season, but he's missing out on one of the better opportunities, if not the best opportunity in the league to possibly repeat. That's what I get from this, is that Laurent Duvernay-Tardif and Damian Williams both opting out of the Chiefs. It's like that is probably your best shot at another Super Bowl. So they got to think this is pretty serious. Which it is, it's a serious situation, but even more so that they would throw that chance away. Which, you know what? They got to do what's best for them. I don't know everybody's personal family situation, and I'm not going to come on here and rip a guy for choosing to opt out of the NFL, but I do believe most of them are truly safer with a team, with everything that's going to be put in place for them, than they are off by themselves. I also believe that's the case for college football players. You get some of these guys that are talking about opting out. We've already got two that did. That running back from Illinois that opted out. You get the cornerback at, where was he, Virginia Tech, I think, that opted out. And you get the talk, well, they want to focus on the draft and all that. That's fine. But don't say it's a safety thing. Because to me, especially in college football, you are safer on campus if you take the proper protocols that you're set to proper procedures and follow all that. You're getting daily testing, or if not every other day. You're safer there than you are anywhere else. All right, we come back to round it out. I kind of jumped the gun with Hank a little bit, but I'm going to talk about it too. Antonio Brown officially handed down a punishment. It's been a long time since he's been waiting on what the NFL was going to do. Will he find himself a team? I'll tell you if he will or not, and where he'll go. That's next. Welcome back. Rounding out the afternoon sports drive, Triple Play Sports Radio Network with Patrick Wheeler. Antonio Brown finally gets his punishment. This dude has been back and forth so many times with everything that he said within the NFL. We all know that he was sitting there with those charges, the assault charge, the sexual assault allegation, I should say, not a charge, and the sexual harassment allegation. All that's still pending. The hearing taking place in September. So putting that aside, he receives an 8-game suspension for violating the personal conduct policy set in place by the NFL. So at least you know that's for sure going to happen. If you're an AB fan, you're like, I might have a chance to get back in. He technically could sign with the team now that that's been handed down, and he could participate in training camp, but the suspension would start at the beginning of the season. So the question is, does a team pull the trigger on Antonio Brown? Do they actually go through with it? We have to remember, this is the guy who couldn't even play for Oakland and threatened to retire because he didn't like his helmet. And lasted one game with New England. Then talked bad about him. He's burned so many bridges amongst the NFL. It's going to take a lot for some team to go ahead. Let's say this. The NFL as a whole and Antonio Brown are not friends. But when you get reports that someone like Lamar Jackson says he wants Antonio Brown on the team, or Russell Wilson expresses interest and wants Antonio Brown on the team, do the Seahawks or do the Ravens or somebody say, you know what, maybe now it's our turn to take a chance? I made this case last year when the Patriots did it, before they did it, said, you know what, to some guys, a lot of guys at that time, owners of teams, they said, we are one piece away from being really good. In fact, we're one wide receiver away from being really good. And Antonio Brown was sitting on the market, but there was a giant red flag sticking out of his back. He was available, but it was waving right there saying, hey, I come with this. I come with this potential and this chance. Which he still does. I also made the argument before that Antonio Brown's talent did outweigh his baggage. I said that before the sexual assault claim. Does it still now? If he gets that 8-game suspension and he's cleared, let's say, or doesn't face the music with these allegations, is his baggage outweighing his talent at this point? I would say maybe not, because if the Ravens have Lamar Jackson, who just got voted number 1 player in the NFL for some reason that no one can really understand why, if he says he wants Antonio Brown, I think he might get him. Pete Carroll has a history of being okay with guys with issues, but you have to take into account that at any moment, Antonio Brown could blow up any type of symmetry amongst your team in that locker room. He could blow it all up. It is a ticking time bomb, but if you can get through the entire 16-game slate with that time bomb still intact, it might pay off big time. It might actually be worth it. But I'm telling you, as everyone who's followed Antonio Brown's saga has understood, that this guy is so back and forth that it's scary. Like, it is scary. There are times where he seems completely normal, seems completely coherent, understands what's going on. Then the next day, like we had in the past news, a couple weeks ago, he said he's officially retiring. It was 2 days later, he came back and said, now I'm actually waiting for the NFL to give me my punishment so I can go play because teams want me on their team. This guy, you don't know what would happen at any moment. And I don't think it's even just that, social media talk, all that. It's on the field. Something doesn't go his way. He swings and he punches a guy, or he swings on his sideline and hits his own player or coach. So yeah, you take a big-time risk if you bring him in. But the reward could be oh so sweet, because in my eyes, Antonio Brown is an automatic top 5 wide receiver when he's in the league. Automatic. He's that good. I like to compare the baggage talent issue here to Colin Kaepernick, because he's on the opposite side. His talent never did outweigh his baggage, and still hasn't. But Antonio Brown's, even with what he's got going on right now, I have to still believe that it does in fact outweigh everything else. That talent is so elite at the wide receiver position that he could change the outcome of many games, especially with the right quarterback. The Ravens need help at wide receiver. They rely extremely heavily on their tight ends. Lamar Jackson still proving that he's a very, very good thrower, okay? In my mind, he's still proving that. If he had a guy like Antonio Brown to go up and make catches, it might help his cause overall as well. If you put Antonio Brown on the Seahawks with a top 5 quarterback in Russell Wilson, that could be really dangerous. They just got Jamal Adams. I don't think they need Antonio Brown because of their weapons they had of wide receiver right now, but if they got him, that's really dangerous. So yeah, if you're asking me, am I a GM? Am I pulling the trigger on Antonio Brown if he's cleared and he gets these 8 games? You know what? I probably would. I think I would. And it might actually even make as much sense for the Seahawks to do it than anybody. You wonder why? Well, think about it. 8-game suspension. An 8-game suspension. So halfway through the year, you can be where you hope to be with Seattle, which is probably going to be in a pretty good spot like usual. If that's the case, and when that's all said and done, half the year's over, you get to bring in Antonio Brown to finish out the latter part of your schedule, that could make a lot of sense. I think it's worth watching. I think he finds a team. I still believe there are enough teams that are interested enough, or at least their quarterbacks are, that they will say, fine, we'll give it a chance, even though we know if this blows up, it could be detrimental. I think you take that risk with Antonio Brown. Some people are going to call me crazy because they've all seen what Antonio Brown does. But we saw New England take a chance with it. He had a good game in one game with an aging Tom Brady. What does he do with half a season with a Russell Wilson or a Lamar Jackson? I think it's dangerous. Dangerous in a good way and dangerous in a bad way as well. All right, before I get off here, I gotta give credit and a shout out here because Mike Golick. Everybody knows Mike Golick's name. Mike and Mike in the Morning. He's what he used to be on. now part of Golick and Wingo on the radio show with ESPN. Just completed 22 years on the radio, and ESPN is kicking him off, which in my mind is just one of many terrible decisions they have made as of late, but moving him to a different role. But I got to say this, for all these years, him doing this, let me say this first, being a sports radio host is not an easy job by any stretch of the imagination. A lot of people think that that's a cakewalk of a job. I'm telling you, especially with someone like Mike Golick doing it at the crack of dawn every single morning, getting up and talking for 3 hours or whatever it was on television and radio for 22 years. That's impressive. And he did it really well for 22 years. Like, he's like top 5 all-time sports radio guys, and he did it for 22 years really, really well at a high level. Back when Mike and Mike was a part of the golden era of ESPN. Again, they've lost it since then. But he was one of those few talents that was still a really big part of their uprising, especially on the radio side. And, he made me want to get into the business. He was part of that. And he is truly, just huge congratulations go out to him, because not a lot of guys can do what he did for so long. It's really, really, really impressive. Really impressive. This has been the Afternoon Sports Drive, Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Thanks for hanging out with me on Friday. Again, just to leave you with your latest news, Major League Baseball is not canceled, but Rob Manfred said it could be if players don't get it going. Part of my response to that, too, wants to be, you know what, shouldn't you be out there saying, what can I do to help? But I think so much of it at this point for him is, look, I had the option there for you guys. I said, we talked about a bubble possibility for the players, and you said no. I think the Players Association left such a bad taste in Rob Manfred's mouth, even though he was a huge reason as well why things didn't get fixed and didn't start sooner, that this is almost like my turn to take a punch, and I'll shut everything down because I have that ability to do so. In a way, to me, he is unstable as a commissioner. His decision-making is absolutely disastrous most of the time. His track record speaks to that. And this is, you want to talk about a ticking time bomb, I'll put it this way, I'm afraid for Major League Baseball, mainly, though, because of who their commissioner is. But also a little bit because we got guys like on the Marlins, and looks like possibly the Cardinals too, we don't know for sure, possibly the Cardinals, that are deciding not to take things serious. And look, if that's the case, you somewhat put Rob Manfred in a tough position. But if players don't want to play, then let's just not play, So let's not play. Hate to say it, but at this point, it seems better than having to wonder if this is going to be the day that unstable Rob Manfred pulls the trigger. It's crazy. Been the Afternoon Sports Drive, Triple Play Sports Radio Network with Patrick Wheeler. Hope everybody has a fantastic weekend. We'll be back here on Monday at 3 o'clock here on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Find me on Twitter at @ThePattyWheels. Have all your sports updates, everything you want on there. And Jason Elmquist should be back with me, I believe, on Monday to start the new week. Everybody have a fantastic weekend.